Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 103. Sorry I'm a little bit late on this. It sort of came out in the last weeks of the holidays, and I had other videos, especially end of the year type ones, I wanted to get out. So I decided to push this as one of the first videos of the year. Might even be the first video of the year. I'm recording this from the before times, aka 2022, so I don't know what it looks like in 2023. Who knows? Regardless, point is, sorry this review is late. This issue, my opinion, another really strong issue. We're only 3 issues in, but I've really been enjoying this run so far. It's really been intriguing. It has a lot of meat to it. I think that there's a lot of intrigue from several different areas, some of which that tie together in regards to the plot. I think they're doing a good job at bringing back some more character stuff. I feel there has been some good character stuff, but I feel some of it's gotten, kind of lost amongst the bigger plots, and I feel we're bringing a little bit more of that in, which is really nice. Not to mention, I think that they've done a really good job of actually taking advantage of a lot of lore that they've set up, both from just PR lore that pre-exists that the comics have touched on and stuff that they have introduced themselves, like Matt and Alpha 1, spoiler alert, which I'll talk about in a minute. We open up with what we think would probably be a flashback, based on previous patterns, but it's actually kind of a mind palace that Zed is in when he's being healed, where he takes on his old Zofram form and is talking to Zordon. And I really like that scene, honestly. It basically just sets him up showing like what Mistress Vile did. She invaded the castle with her new mysterious villain called the Vessel, and they basically doesn't tell us anything we didn't already know, but it just sort of sets it up a little bit more. And I'm hoping this is kind of a setup for maybe an interesting dynamic of Zed and Zordon working together. I still have mixed feelings on the way Zed's been handled, mainly because I feel he hasn't gotten a moment to shine like Rita in a villain capacity, but I think that I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, as it feels like they could be setting up for a nice redemptive moment for Zed. By redemptive moment, I don't mean him becoming a good guy, I just mean redemptive as a character, and maybe he'll have a big villain moment. And the fact that he's there certainly lends to some interesting interactions and possible interesting future stories. But that's where we set up. And then this issue honestly just kind of deals with the aftermath of the big confrontation. It does a really good job of being kind of those like stepping stone aftermath issues where you deal with stuff like that, but it's also building on things. As far as aftermath, you have everyone's reactions to like this big event and being hurt by this battle and Matt being taken. Kimberly obviously being one of the biggest, reactors because she has the most relationship with Matt, talking about their past together, and it causes her to become very cold and very short in this issue. She literally, she's all of a sudden 5'1". Actually, I don't know her original height, but you know what I mean. My point is that she becomes very short, cuts people off and is very quick to react to things. And she's like, why are we even saving Zed? I'm like, that's a good debate. It's like, because we're the Power Rangers, we're the good guys. And it opens up a lot of interesting debate. And then at the end, she does something really cool, which I'm going to just put a pin in a minute because I think it ties into some potential larger things. But Aisha also has a big reaction because she started to get close to Matt. And now she's like, well, what if he dies? And I never get to explore that. I thought that was a nice moment for her and Adam comforting her, because I've mentioned this before and I'm sorry to be repetitive, but I feel like the Stone Canyon trio has gotten really sidelined, except for Rocky, who finally got a nice moment in one of the last arcs. So it's kind of nice to see them get these little character moments like the early mmpr Rangers have gotten all throughout the run, especially in the early days. So I'm hoping that's more of a sign of things to come. Also, a really nice small scene, but is Grace reacting to Matt being taken and being like, I can't believe you let this happen again, Zordon. You're always putting Rangers in danger and risking their lives. And she's like, well, Grace, remember, you're the one that gave him the morpher. I don't want to be that guy, but... And it was a really nice interaction because I like the dynamic between Zordon and Grace. I think that the idea of them being these sort of opposite end rivals, with her as the Green Ranger or her having the Green Ranger and him with his team, was underutilized before they've now joined forces, but it's an interesting dynamic, and I think this scene really highlighted that there's still some differences and some anger there for what was done to her, but also highlights that she kind of did a similar thing and that they're at a different place. And it was a very small scene, but also a very appreciated scene. There's also some scenes with the villains as they're sort of talking about the status quo. I'm confused about this part because they talk about how she got through to the Zeo Crystal defenses and got the Zeo Crystal with this Vessel villain, who's also, side note, really cool looking villain, very mysterious, very curious where they're going with that. I think that's another nice little subtle element. There's a lot of bigger things going on I'm interested in, but I think they're building this in the background as a smaller mystery, which I'm really excited to find out about. But anyway, how is she holding it? Did I miss a part in this issue or another issue? Maybe it's because she's so powerful and she's wearing magic gloves or whatever, but isn't the reason Zed looks like Zed is because he touched the Zeo Crystal or a Zeo Crystal? And she's holding this and nothing's happening to her. I'm curious about that. Also, I am curious too, it might just be the art style and then wanting this to look closer to the Zeo Crystal in the show, because this one's clearly the Zeo Crystal look from the show, you know, the one it looks like where it's the different subcrystals. But the one that was used in the Eltarian War arc for Zed's arc looked different. And I made a theory video about that. I'm wondering if, like, you know, obviously the Zeo Crystal comes from this planet, as we established, so there's probably more running out there. I'm still curious if that was just a stylistic choice or if they are two different Zeo Crystals, because I think it would be cool if this one obviously is the one we know that will eventually give them Zeo powers, but if the other shard is actually the one that powers the Gold Ranger powers, because we never got really an explanation of where that came from. That's just a small side note. But the point is we kind of touch on everyone and where they're at in regards to what happened. Also, we catch up with Jason. We see Jason, he's on a run, he runs into Bulk and Skull. Bulk and Skull are like, hey, can you train us in karate? And he's like, you know, I'm kind of focusing on my dad right now. Nothing too huge, but I thought it was interesting that we were checking in on Jason so soon. I didn't think we were going to, like, get rid of him or spend an enormously, like, large amount of time away from him. But I honestly thought it was going to be a little while before we saw him again. So I found it interesting that we're checking in with him already, and I'm very curious to see where they end up going with him and how consistently he remains a part of the story. Because obviously now we're, like, one comic, it's not splitting into the Omegas and the regulars. We started to delve into the Omegas, and it seems they're going to be weaved in and going back and forth. But I'm curious about Jason, so how they weave that in and all that stuff. But it was interesting the fact that we checked in on him. But he's there with Bulk and Skull when the monster arrives, and this leads to sort of the end chain of events, which I think is the big cliffhanger and main point of this issue, which is this monster shows up, they're having a hard time fighting it. It turns out the monster was just a distraction so that Rita could escape with Matt, who they're doing mysterious stuff with. Who, again, side note, very apprehensive about the idea of them doing Evil Green Ranger 2.0, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt for now. But anyway, Kim's just like, to hell with this. She gets in the Firebird Thunder Zord. Boom. You looking for this? And she destroys the monster with her Zord. And Tommy's like, oh, but Zordon's like wimpy rule of not escalating a battle. You can't do that. And I really liked this. I always found Zordon's rules to be kind of dumb. Not in the sense that they're all wrong, but I think that often when they're talked about, they're very cut and dry, black and white. And that's just not the way things are. And obviously it would make for a very fun show if every episode was Rita being like, oh, it's the pig monster, and they just stepped on it. Boom, you're done. I mean, that would be pretty boring. I mean, to be fair, the formula's pretty boring anyway. But it would make for a really short show if every time they just ended the conflict before it started. But I think that that's a debate that could be interesting, because I think it is a case-by-case basis. In this case, there was no harm. They got the job done. You know, I think that was well done. And I think when you're in a show, or a format that isn't the show, where you can actually explore things on a deeper and more interesting level, it's worth exploring. It's one of my favorite moments in the issue. And I think it's no coincidence that Alpha 1 shows up at the end, because they get a distress call from the Omegas, specifically the Omega Red Zord. And earlier in the issue, they think about calling the Omegas as a distress call, and it's interesting that Kim's like, they'll probably just ignore us anyway. Douchebags! I'm not bitter. She didn't say it like that, but it's interesting that there's still like almost a resentment to the Omegas and a tension there. I think that's interesting. And again, something that wouldn't happen in the show universe where they're all from Pleasantville. But anyway, they bring them up earlier, but then it comes back around at the end. They respond to this distress signal, and it turns out the crashed Red Zord actually doesn't have an Omega in it. It's Alpha 1. And if you don't know who Alpha 1 is, you're a fake fan. Sad! Alpha 1 was from the Go-Go Power Rangers comic. Highly underrated. I think if you haven't read it, the Go-Go Power Rangers comics are worth a read. I think they have a lot of really cool stuff in it. But from one of my favorite arcs, one of my favorite comic characters, very underrated character, who's basically, obviously you can tell by the number, he's one Alpha made before 5, because that's how numbers work. But also, he had some very interesting takes on Zordon being a half measure, which was very fascinating. And I think it's no coincidence that he shows up right after Kim made a decision that questions Zordon's rules. So I'm very excited to have him back in general, but I think if it opens up an aspect about that moral debate, it could be even more fascinating. Overall, another strong issue. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5 as well. Again, really enjoying this run so far. Really good mix of character and story. And again, I think really taking advantage of a lot of the stuff they've introduced and weaving it together and also moving in new directions. So I'm really excited to see what happens next. Let me know what you guys think of the continuation of this arc, what you think of Alpha 1's arrival in the comments as always. That makes it sound like I always ask what you think of Alpha 1's arrival. That should be a staple now in any of my videos. Like I'm reviewing a Rider belt and be like, let me know what you think of Alpha 1's arrival. Reviewing a Ben 10 toy. Let me know what you think of Alpha 1's arrival. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps to ring that bell so you can get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.